Hot Days by Griffin Rose on AO3. Episode 35. Chapter 7. Summer Camp, Part 1. Coda. The bus stopped for a break, and Izuku climbed out with everyone else and happily stretched his legs. "Oh, wow! Look at the view!" someone yelled, and half the class wandered over to the edge to peer out over the trees. Izuku was distracted by Pixie Bob and Manday of the Wild Wild Pussycats. He'd been hounding Shouta for 3 years to introduce him, ever since he found out that he worked with them for things like this. Shouta had always refused. It took him several minutes to realize that if this was a bathroom break, there should be bathrooms. He made eye contact with Shouta and spotted the manic grin just visible under the folds of the scarf. Oh, no. The cliffside crumbled, tossing all 20 of them to the ground. Izuku was one of the lucky ones who could use their quirk to soften his landing. Others, like Kaminari and Aoyama, landed in painful heaps. "The camp is in that direction. If you don't make it by lunch, you don't get to eat," Pixie Bob taunted. Well, that was illogical. Withholding food wouldn't help train them, so Izuku wrote that off as a logical ruse and didn't worry about it. He did, however, worry about the giant rock monster now standing in front of them. This would not be, as they say, a walk in the park. He spent the day shifting between various animals. He charged through golems as Rhino, assigned in combo attacks with his classmates, led other gnomes to a wild goose chase away from his exhausted friends. By the time they made it at camp, it was sunset. He spent barely any part of the day as a human. With Coda able to translate for him, he hadn't needed to. The speed of his transformation suffered as the hours went by, and it took him considerable effort to morph back into a human when he saw Shouta and the Pussycats outside the lounge. 2 legs, coordinated, threw him off for a second, and he immediately face-planted as he changed in balance. He decided to stay on the ground. He was too tired to get up. Several others also collapsed when they finally reached safety. Pixie Bob and Manday started talking, saying something about their performance today. Izuku lifted his head and tried to pay attention, but then he saw the kid in the background. What was a kid doing here? Curiosity motivated him to get up and managed to get his way over to the kid. It took more concentration than he'd wanted to admit, but he made it. "Hi there, I'm Izuku Midoriya." The swift punch to his groin sent him to the ground again. Tenya and Todoroki were at his side in an instant. "Koda!" Manday scolded. "I am so sorry, this is my nephew." "Are you alright, Todoroki?" Todoroki asked. Izuku gave him a shaky smile. Tears blurred his vision. "You fiendish child!" Tenya called after Coda. Coda turned back with a glare. "The last thing I want is to hang out with a bunch of wannabe heroes." And there was a lot to unpack with that. But Coda stomped off, and the class was shepherded along for dinner. And after the long day they had, Izuku didn't have the energy to chase after Coda. He was curious, though. The boy didn't leave his thoughts. Shouta checked on him at the start of dinner. "You okay?" "I'm tired more than anything," Izuku admitted. "I didn't think I'd ever shifted so many times in one day before." Shouta ruffled his hair. "Better get used to it. You'll be doing it all camp." Izuku straightened with interest. Shouta had been tight-lipped about the plans for the last 2 weeks. All Izuku had warmed out of him was that it would be training routine from hell. Even now, Shouta refused to elaborate, sending Izuku off to eat dinner with his classmates. He caught a few more glimpses of Coda throughout the night, the same scowl plastered on the boy's face. The kid ever smile? Half his mind was still thinking about it later when they were at the bathrooms, though Mineta made a good attempt at distracting him. Then Coda pushed Mineta off the wall, and then Coda fell too. Izuku sprinted. He wasn't fast enough to outright catch Coda, not from so far away, but he could get under him and break his fall. He shifted into a walrus, something with a lot of fat and blubber that could also absorb more of the impact. His organs still weren't happy with him, and he'd have some bruises for sure from Koda's sharp knees and elbows. It was better than how Tenya broke Minetta's fall. He'd be teasing his best friend about that for a while. He brought Koda to Manday's office afterwards and learned about Koda's parents. His heart went out to the kid. He knew how hard it was to lose your parent at that age, and with them being pro-heroes, he could imagine how he would feel if something happened to Shouta or Hisashi. He was old enough now that he'd understand if they were both killed in the line of duty. But if he had been Koda's age? Well, losing his mom had screwed with his head so badly, he'd been a cat for 3 months. And that was without the messy complications of dying to save someone else. Leaving the office, he got dressed and sought out his dad. Shouta was discussing something with Flag, but he immediately perked up when Izuku came in. Izuku hugged him. "Love you." Shouta brought an arm around Izuku. "Love you too, bud. Did something happen?" Humming, Izuku explained what happened in the baths, and then what Mayday told him. Shouta hugged him a little tighter. "Koda just needs time. Everyone deals with the grief differently. And thank you for telling me about Mineta." "I know, he just seems so angry at everyone." Of course, for all Izuku knew, Koda could have been like that before his parents were killed too. Bakugo was always angry, and he wasn't grieving anyone. Shouta chuckled. "Not everyone could be as cheerful as you. Do you think there's anything I could do to help him?" "I think we're better off leaving this to the pussycats. You're gonna have your hands full with training, and then in 2 weeks, you'll be gone." Izuku frowned, but he saw his dad's point. It wasn't fair for Izuku to butt his nose into Koda's business, potentially building up a bond with him, and then abandoning him. But how could Izuku not try and help him? "Trust Mandate and the others," should have told him before shooing him off to bed. The next morning started far too early. Izuku loved his dad, but he still wanted to kick his ass for making them wake up before the sun. Just because Shouta had no concept of a sleep schedule doesn't mean the rest of them didn't. The promise of focusing on their individual quirks woke them up pretty quickly, though. Since they all needed to focus on different things to maximize their quirks, they each had different training regimens. When the hell had Shouta even had time to plan all this? Between Hitoshi's adoptions and planning the finals, the man didn't exactly have a lot of free time. Pixie Bob made more golems for Izuku to fight against, and a nearby timer was set off to go every 5 minutes. At the little bell, Izuku had to morph again. Pixie Bob liked to throw out suggestions to challenge him. His coordination as a human again suffered at lunchtime, and by dinner the group unanimously decided not to let him near sharp objects. Cooking with everyone was fun, even if they were all bone-tired and ready to pass out. The food was edible at best, and definitely not going to win any Culture awards, but caring about the quality of their meal was beyond them at that moment. Izuku was listening to Tenya discuss the process of the day he spied Koda walking off the woods. The boy knew these woods better than Izuku did, but with Ragdoll around, they'd know if he was hurt or anything. But it still left a sour feeling in his stomach, watching him disappear in the trees. Dad had told him to leave this alone, but Izuku couldn't. He didn't doubt the pussycats were doing everything they could, but Koda needed someone who understood. So, he made his extra plate of dinner and followed Koda. The trail wasn't exactly well traveled, but it was noticeable enough for anyone looking. I guess Koda must have been going to a specific top, and the pussycats either knew where it was or wanted to respect his privacy. With a big lodge like this, likely very different from how Koda grew up, the boy probably just needed a spot for just him. Izuku found Koda sitting outside of a cave overlooking the woods, already scowling at his footsteps. "What do you want?" Koda demanded. Izuku held up a plate. "I thought you might be hungry." "I don't want your nasty food." "It's not that bad," Izuku defended weakly. He took a seat a few feet away from Koda, placing the plate halfway between them. Koda wasn't appalled by the offering, So Izuku decided to cut the small talk. Mayday told me about your mom and dad. Kota stiffened. It really sucks, losing your parents so unexpectedly. Izuku went on. Kota looked at him from the corner of his eye. Aren't you going to tell me their sacrifice was worth it? That's how they would have wanted to die? No, because I doubt they wanted to die at all, Izuku said. Even if they did, it doesn't suck any less for you. It took Kota a few minutes to reply. Izuku gave him the time. Everyone always says I should be proud of them. But how can I be proud of them for leaving me behind? They cared more about being stupid heroes and showing off than about coming home. I'm sure they wanted to come home, Izuku said. He had to be careful with what he said next. If he didn't get it right, it would only make Kota angrier. But sometimes, no matter how badly you want something, it just can't happen. He thought of his mother, injured on the sidewalk, with Hisashi stomping closer, telling Izuku to run. She hadn't wanted to die. She wanted Izuku to be safe. And he was sure she'd wanted to see him again. But fate hadn't worked out that way. It's stupid, Kota growled. What is? Heroes, quirks, all of it. If they hadn't been heroes showing off their quirks, they would have never fought that man. Everyone wants to be a hero. It's selfish. They don't care about anyone else. Yikes. This was more than grief. These thoughts could potentially turn Kota down some dark path when he was older. Izuku was at a loss on how to answer him. He admired heroes his whole life, lived with them for half of that. He literally couldn't comprehend calling heroes selfish, not when Shouta and Hisashi had gone out of their way to change their lifestyles and adopted him. Of course, not every hero was like that. He knew. It didn't matter what rank they were. Endeavor had been number 2 for years, and his family life was a disaster. He took too long forming an answer. Forget it. You'll never understand. Kota hugged his knees. You're just like them. Kota, leave me alone already. I don't want to talk to you. Staying would probably do more harm than good. Not when Izuku didn't know how to approach any of Kota's issues. Reluctantly, he pushed himself to his feet. Don't forget to eat. He felt like he had failed a test as he walked back to the campsite. He wanted to help Kota so badly, and he knew he had the best chance at understanding, but Kota was still so angry. It was like he didn't want to be helped. If he wasn't so exhausted from the day of training, he never would have fallen asleep. Thoughts of Kota and how to help him would have kept him up all night. Instead, he was unconscious almost as soon as he lay down. The next day was pretty much the same. Only Izuku's goal was to stay transformed as larger animals than elephants and rhinos all day. He always had trouble with the bigger creatures, and fighting All Might had proven that sometimes brute force was going to be needed. He was only human during lunch, and he couldn't figure out how fingers work, so he ate directly from his plate, much to Tenya's amusement. You keep this up, we're gonna have to resort to cat food again, he joked. Izuku glared at him. Don't you dare. Eating nothing but cat food was still one of his top 10 nightmares. Tenya grinned. It'll be much less messier than this. He gestured to the sauce dripping from Izuku's cheeks. I'll dunk my head in the river, it's fine, Izuku said. Do you have something against cat food? Uraraka asked. Yes. Izuku refused to elaborate. Tenya did a poor job of hiding his laugh, and even Todoroki was fighting a smile. Uraraka offered. Tenya opened his mouth to start explaining, and Izuku kicked him. If anyone was going to tell Uraraka his tragic black story, it was going to be him. But they only had a few minutes left of lunch, and he didn't really have the energy to spare for that kind of conversation. Plus, with so many classmates around, someone else would overhear, and he'll just have to repeat himself over and over as everyone figured out what he was talking about. He definitely didn't have the energy for that. Another day, Izuku said before dropping his face on his plate again. After lunch, Tenya helped him clean off his face, And then it was back to training. Izuku's coordination was even worse by dinner, and all he was allowed to do was stir the stew. It seemed like meals and sleeping weren't enough for his mind to recalibrate all of his morphing, and he was seriously worried how much of a disaster he'll be at the end of these 2 weeks. At least he wasn't the same animal all day long. Then he'd be recreating specific habits, and that was always embarrassing. In the middle of dinner, he noticed Kota was missing. He'd missed the boy leaving again, but he knew where he was now, so he wasn't worried. He grabbed another plate and clumsily filled it up. "Where are you going?" Todoroki asked. "I'm gonna go try to befriend Kota," Izuku said. He put the plate down while he talked. "I don't really know how to help him. He hates heroes because of what happened to his parents, and we're all trying to be heroes, but..." Izuku shrugged. "I have to do something." Todoroki nodded. "With what happened to his parents, words probably won't mean anything to him." "Yeah, telling him heroes just want to help people won't make him change his mind. I wonder how I could show him, though." "You might not be able to. Not in less than 2 weeks," Todoroki admitted. "But you could lay the groundwork for the pussycats later on." "Yeah, thanks, Todoroki." Picking up the plate again, Izuku hurried to the cave. Sure enough, Kota sat, mopping outside of it again. "I still don't want to talk to you," Kota stated. Izuku set the plate down beside them. "I figured. But I still don't want you to go hungry. Like Auntie or the others would let that happen." Kota scoffed, rolling his eyes. He picked up a handful of pebbles and started tossing them off the cliff, one at a time. "Good. I'm glad they're taking care of you," Izuku said. Kota hurled a pebble with particular force. "Why are you really here?" Izuku shrugged. "I don't know. I guess because I feel like I understand a little of what you're going through. I lost my parents around your age, too." He paused before throwing the next pebble. "You did?" Izuku nodded, scooping up his own handful of pebbles. "They weren't heroes or anything. Though, I guess my dad counts as a villain? He had a fire-breathing quirk, and a temper, and he ended up killing my mom and setting our apartment on fire." "That sucks," Kota said. Snorting, Izuku agreed. "Yeah, it does. Messed me up for real long. My quirk lets me morph into animals, and I got stuck as a cat for a few months." "Like, you were actually a cat? Did anyone know?" "Not at first," Izuku said. "I spent a few days as a stray, until I ran into a hero, busting an attempted robbery. When I tried to get his attention, he thought I was just a regular cat and took me home. Took a while to finally communicate I was a kid." He didn't miss the irony that he had yet to explain this to Uraraka, but apparently had no problems dumping his life story on a kid he barely knew. Uraraka would launch him into the sun if she knew. "And let me guess, once he knew you were a kid, he dropped you off with the police, and that was the last time you saw him, but you still admire him because he saved your life?" Kota summarized. "Almost," Izuku said. "He did have to take me to the police, since there was a missing persons report for me, and I did go into foster care for a while after that. But I did see him again. He came by every week to help me train my quirk. And then he eventually adopted me. He had to take on a teaching job and move in with his best friend to a bigger apartment to make it work. Practically changed his entire lifestyle just to accommodate me. He's still my dad, and he always will be." "Must have wanted the publicity," Kota dismissed. Izuku laughed. "No, he very much did not. He's an underground hero. He avoids publicity at all cost." Kota had no reply to that. Izuku refrained in his laughter. "Look, I know not all heroes are like that. Some of them are downright terrible and abusive to their families. But at their core, most heroes just want to help people. Sometimes they're not strong enough. I know your parents would have come home if they could have." "That doesn't make it okay," Kota said with a shaky voice. "They should have tried harder to come home." "Even if that meant someone else got hurt?" Izuku asked. "That's not fair!" Kota shouted, jumping up and throwing the last of his rock over the cliff. Of course I don't want anyone else to be hurt. I'm not a villain, but it's not okay that they didn't come home. I don't care if they saved someone else. I miss them. I never said it was okay, Izuku said. I still haven't forgiven my parents for what happened to them. And it's been 7 years now. I don't think about it too much, but I'm still angry with my dad. You're allowed to be angry and miss your parents. He was mostly quoting different things Shouta and Hisashi had said to him over the years. He had every emotion under the sun when it came to his parents, and each one of them had helped him deal with those emotions in different ways. I wasn't asking for your permission, Kota snapped. Just leave me alone. Stop bothering me. Kota, go! Kota yelled. Sighing, Izuku stood up and brushed himself off. All right, don't forget to eat, he wanted to say, but making Kota more upset wouldn't help anything. He'd keep trying, though. Maybe by the end of camp, he'd get somewhere. If only he'd known what was about to happen that night. Oh, fuck. Alright. Next chapter is gonna be broken up in 2 parts because this chapter is long. I'm assuming this chapter is probably gonna be around 40 minutes long, so yeah, it's about to be 2. Because I see the cursor bar thingy. I don't even need to. Okay, so, it's called Summer Camp Part 2, Attack. The camp's night of revelry and fun is rudely interrupted when the League attacks. Izuku's doing everything he can to protect everyone he cares about, but there's a lot of people, and only one of him. It's a true banquet of darkness. Banquet of darkness! Do you think Tokoyami, if he watched, like, Psyche K, like, he'd go from being, like, Banquet of Darkness to Dark Reunion? I have to call them out all the time. Dark Reunion. Oh my god. Okay, but this was an emotional chapter. I always like seeing how this chapter changes each time, depending on, different things, you know? Why was this alcohol wipe completely dry as I opened it? I could have been dying and needed this. Okay, ignore me. I have a headache and alcohol. This one has 2. What? And I wiped my head with alcohol. Like the forehead with those alcohol wipes. Because it cools out my head. And it helps with my headache. I'm like super close to bringing in my, what's it called? Bucket of water and putting my feet in it. Yeah, you heard me. I sometimes do that. Yep. The shit I do to get rid of headaches and migraines. I get them on a regular basis. At least once a month. This one's lasted for 2.5 days. So this one's a nice one. Anyways, as I was saying, I always like seeing the different ways Izuku talks with his mom. Not with his mom, with Kota, about, you know, different things. There's some where Inko was abusive, there's some where Inko died. There's different ones, different things, and I always find it really interesting. Like as I said, for Fluffy Mind, I'm gonna be really interested in writing this because Izuku's not allowed to say that his mom died, so he can't outright be like, I understand, you know, my mom died. I did want to make a kind of really, really evil move where Izuku's like, you know, sometimes you really miss them, and no matter what you do, you can, like, really describing what it is to grieve. And then Kota saying something like, have you lost one of your parents? And like, hold up, you're sounding a little bit too much like me. And Izuku having to say, no, I haven't. Because I'm evil. But moving on. Moving on. This was a really interesting chapter, and I'm really scared about the following because this always scares me every time, without a doubt. It's like you can see the train coming to hit you, but you don't know at what speed it's going and how hard it's going to hit you and if you're going to live. Like, you know it's going to hit you. Like, you have your blindfold and you're hearing it, and you know it's going to hit you. Because you've seen this happen over and over and over and over, but you don't know how hard it's going to hit you. You know? It's the one thing I hate about fanfiction in this fandom. Especially when it's, canon, timeline. Not canon timeline as in, like, it follows a canon timeline strictly, but it, roughly follows the same time events, from My Hero Academia. Because that shit always messes me up. Having to relive the sports festival is the one that's so boring because it's like, but this one is always like, you know, 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 like, I'm sorry. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, my head hurts. Take your meds, eat your food. Wait, hold up. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds, have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.